Welcome to Nepal Now. My name is Marty Logan. Room to Read works with more than 4,400 high school-age girls in 3 districts in Nepal. During the COVID-19 lockdown, from April to July 2020, 98% of those girls were unsure about returning to their school when it reopened. They were scared about the pandemic, their families were feeling the economic crunch, and they had already missed months of school in their final years of education, so it would be easy to not return. The organization knew it had to react, says Salina Tamang, Girls Education Senior Program Manager, in today's episode. First, it connected with the girls via mobile phones, and then turned to one of the oldest media, radio. Their first goal was to provide factual information about COVID, to reassure the students and their families. Next, they worked to rekindle the learning spark, again among both the girls and their families. In the end, 100 of the girls ended up getting married, instead of returning to studies. But thanks to last year's experience, fewer girls are at risk today. And Room to Read is planning to incorporate radio into its permanent program. Now, here's my chat with Salina Tamang. Salina Tamang, welcome to Nepal Now podcast.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Marty.
So I know that last year Room to Read did a survey in 8 countries in Asia, including Nepal. And the finding was very significant, quite shocking actually. It said that almost 1 in 2 girls were at a higher risk of not returning to school after the lockdown. Can you tell me, so it's about 1 year after, can you tell me, is the situation the same now, better, worse? Do you know how it's looking?
You know, when the COVID started and me working in Nepal as the Girls Education Senior Program Manager, it was sort of like a panic situation in the beginning, especially for the girls, because they were getting all this negative news from social media and friends and families. So the immediate thing that Room to Read did was to stay in touch with the girls, to sort of give them the relevant information on COVID and then the situation. And we normally, in normal circumstances, track girls who are at risk of dropping out, because our program is all about ensuring that the girls complete secondary level education in all the countries that we work in. So since the circumstances were different, we started doing a program called Remote Individual Mentoring, where the social mobilizers who are in charge of these girls in terms of mentoring and giving them life skills education started reaching out to them through phones. So we had some risk indicators which did show that almost 98% of girls were sort of like in a dilemma or, in a confusion, and that, they were really scared or uncertain about going back to school. Mostly it was because they were scared of the pandemic. The other risk factor that was, highly seen was their family members, their parents losing their sources of income because of the lockdown, because of which, they knew that they would not be able to afford their education any longer. And also, if time came, the priority would be more of, educating their sons rather than the daughters, because we had been working with them in sort of building up that motivation towards their daughter's education. And because as the time progressed, they started losing that motivation, even the parents and both of the girls. So we knew that we had to definitely get into action. But the situation right now is a lot better. And, because of all the pivot activities that we did. And when the schools reopened, we did not see a lot of dropping out. because of what we did to tackle the problems and the challenges. The situation actually was better than when the schools were in normal circumstances.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. The worst case scenario didn't come about. So now we're again in another lockdown. Kids aren't, for the most part, taking school, although some in private schools, say here in Kathmandu and probably the bigger cities also, they're doing online learning, but that's really the minority of students in the country. So then Room to Read has now come up with a new program, I guess, which is kind of a follow-on from the one you were describing. And it's all about using the radio to, if I understand correctly, both just to keep girls connected with Room to Read and with what's going on around them with the pandemic, with society, but also to try to keep them learning during the lockdown. So can you tell me more about that?
The remote individual mentoring calls that we did last year was actually only one of the programs that we did, because we started radio. I think it was the first time that Room to Read, in any of the countries actually started radio for the first time, because most of our work involves being in school, and giving them sessions and workshops in schools and mentoring them to talk about their problems and finding solutions. But then, we knew that it was very important, if the girls were to continue being motivated, continue learning at home, to give them some sort of the same kind of support. So we started radio program last year in April, and we sort of did a situation analysis where we found out that the first thing we had to do was cater to their mental health. We started with sessions on COVID, and then also to give them information. And then the second thing that we had to sort of address was their motivation towards their studies and the parents' motivation. So, we were sort of new to that, but we still thought of the best thing that could help to sort of maintain their motivation. So we actually got some of our alumni who's already graduated from our programs to tell their stories on radio about how they faced their challenges, overcame them, and now they're like career women and doing really good and helping financially at home, and also being financially secure, as well as local community level women to talk about their own struggles and then how they're successful. So after that, we knew that the learning had to be continued, because Room to Read is about giving life skills on top of the academic motivation to girls. So we started doing life skills through radio, which was on the topics that we already have in our curriculum. So it was more about self-awareness, about being how to sort of calm themselves in this situation, how to help their families. And then we also, covered issues on having a safe space, because we had heard about mental breakdowns, about abuse at home. So we knew that we had to talk about these issues as well. And then we finally got to the point where we started talking about, their love for the school, about how to study at home, how to continue, their learnings at home, and then gradually thinking about their goals and their careers. So it was quite successful, because when we did the remote individual mentoring in the beginning, the girls at risk was almost 98%, but that we managed to bring it down to 2% by the end of the year. But then this second lockdown was even more chaotic, because they had finally gotten used to being at school, and then used to being in sort of like a normal situation. But then all of a sudden schools were closing, and they were back home. So right now we haven't actually gotten to life skills yet, but we thought about a different kind of radio program. So we sort of prepared 8 different episodes, and the first one being we got an expert to talk about, the COVID. It was a medical expert, so that they got all the information, and then the questions were asked by the girls themselves and their families. And then secondly, we had a head teacher who actually was a COVID survivor to talk about, how he battled COVID mentally, physically, and managed to survive through it, so that, he sort of gave motivation. And then gradually, we brought it down to early marriages, because early marriage was also a big factor last year. And then to talk about, safe space. So that's what we are doing right now on radio.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I want to ask you about the questions that you said the girls and their families posed. But first, just a detail. We're talking about, if I understand correctly, girls in high school. Are they across the country, or are they in only certain provinces? Who are we talking about?
The girls that we're working with right now is around 4,417 plus in 3 different districts of Nepal. We sort of work around the school system rather than focusing just on an individual girls. So the districts are selected, the schools are selected, and then we work with them to make sure that they get the services that we're providing. We are planning to scale up with our programs, because life skill is an integral part of the government's plan, and it's also been integrated in the national curriculum, to integrate it within the local system of the government, so that they get support from our more than 20 years of experience working in life skills, to sort of roll out the curriculum with the supplementary help and materials that we can provide, and also to scale up not just to the municipalities and the schools that we're working in, but beyond that as well.
Okay, well, that sounds very promising. So when you were mentioning one of the earlier, I guess the phase that came before this more recent phase, where you had asked girls and their parents to ask questions and give feedback, what did you find? What were they most interested in or worried about? Was it the pandemic? Was it when they go back to school? When can they start studying? Was it more of these kind of life questions that you've described?
If I recall the questions, I don't remember anything that had to do with school, but I think they were worried about the current situation, because most of the questions that came were like, people are getting infected everywhere in the community, in the society. There are people dying, and we're sort of like in the middle of it. And there were questions about, what does it mean that there is this second wave, and then there's going to be maybe a third wave, and what are the variants? So it was sort of like very practical questions. And then there was this question from one of our program girls. She was asking, so when are we going to get vaccines for people who are teenagers or below 18? And then there was another questions where a girl asked about, there are all this talk going around that COVID can be treated through herbal medicines. We can make medicines at home using so and so materials. So how true is that? And then another girl asked a question on, okay, so my father is he's COVID positive, so how do I look after him, or my mother look after him, keeping ourselves safe? And she actually later on reported back to us saying it was very helpful, and then that her father has recovered, and they were able to give him the full support because of the program. So it was very, very practical sort of questions in terms of the current situation and what to do if one of their family members or themselves are COVID positive, what are the services available, and so forth.
Okay. I mean, in a way, it's a bit surprising that they haven't got that information, because it seems like there's a lot of information around, but maybe that's just me being online all the time and actually seeing all of this stuff on Twitter, but not realizing that not everyone is always connected, right?
Like I said, most of the girls that we work with, like I would say, do not have their own mobile phones or have connection to the internet. So they have to depend on whatever they hear from, like maybe their neighbors or their family members or their friends. So that was why I thought that it was very important that they got accurate and correct information about the situation.
Okay, right. If I'm understanding correctly, one of the main motivations or the main aims of this program is to, as you just described, inform the girls. And that information includes a lot of discussion about things they're worried about their concerns. And then also maybe the second or another main aim of the program is to keep the girls motivated to learn and to be ready to go back to school. Now, when that happens, and we still don't know when, but it looks like it may be coming relatively soon. Will you keep doing this kind of radio program? Do you know? Have you planned ahead?
The reason that we thought radio would be appropriate, because we're working with girls who do not have access to any other means. Radio was sort of like the best way to reach out to as many as possible. We do have some challenges around radio programs because, like I mentioned before, not all the girls have access to radios or are using their parents' mobile to sort of listen to the programs, and we had to work around a lot of different time slots to be able to reach out to as many girls as possible. We've also thought about alternatives in terms of how we can get girls to access these programs. Our social mobilizer actually came up with this plan of doing collective calls to girls, conference calls, and then making sure that they hear the radio, from the phone. So it would be like around 8 to 10 girls during one call. This was during the lockdown time, but then when the schools opened and we realized that there were still some percentage of girls who did not have the correct the means of listening to these radios. So what our social mobilizers did was they actually made small groups of girls and got their laptops with the radio recording and then a speaker, and then played the radio programs in the radio. So we are planning to continue radio programs because we feel like it does not only benefit our program girls, but it is beneficial to all the adolescents, especially studying in the secondary level. So we are planning around doing radio programs based on the life skills curriculum that we have, matching to the government's own curriculum, and then maybe some aspects of gender equality in education, involving certain programs that would be beneficial to both boys and girls. We're also thinking in future about the vulnerability of students actually losing their homes, losing their schools, or even losing the time that they need to be in school because of the climate change, the floods, and then the landslides and the earthquake and all that, because Nepal, has some places which are hotspots to these disasters. So we're also looking at connecting life skills, what they've learned in life skills to prevent or save themselves from this catastrophes as well in the future. We're not just looking at doing community-based or local-based radio programs, but we're looking at doing a national radio programs, because this is not our forte. Like room to read expertise in radio is what we've learned from last year. And so we are planning to work with maybe another organization who is expert in radio to sort of build capacity of our own staff and also to develop technically sound programs for girls and boys all around Nepal. So this is like a 3 to 4 years planning that we've already done.
That sounds very ambitious. And it's really interesting to hear you mention climate change, because it seems to be touching almost every aspect of our lives these days. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Tell me just a little bit more about life skills. If you break that down a little bit, what things are we talking about?
The life skills that we've been giving since the last, I would say, 15 to 20 years is all based on the changes that the adolescents go through once they reach puberty, and then the pre and the post phases. So it's all based on that, and most of the topics and the curriculum are based on the different changes that they go through as per the different ages that they go through from grade 6 to 12 of completing their secondary level education. So the three major factors that we focus on in terms of life skills is the girls being self-aware, knowing who they are, knowing their values and their beliefs, and sort of, using that to sort of make make the right decisions in their lives. And then, the second thing is about being empowered through different topics like how to communicate effectively, how to solve problems creatively, how to think critically. And then the third main aspect that we focus on is being socially aware. This talks about peer pressure, not to give in to peer pressure and how to say no so that they have the right tool to make that decision to continue their schools. And as they grow older, it's about having healthy relationships with the opposite sex, and to have and to find out how to make a safe space for themselves, how to be safe from abuse. And we also talk about acquaintance rape, because we know that a lot of rape that happens in Nepal is of that nature. So and then later on, as they become senior, like I would say they reach grade 10 to 12, we focus on internet safety. We focus on how to prepare themselves for higher level education, to sort of prepare for their career. So it's all sort of interconnected, the topics, and then we have different topics for each grade. So basically, we are teaching these girls ultimately to be able to make the right decisions for themselves in critical times, and also the most important decisions in their lives. And that involves, firstly, to be able to continue their education, to decide whom to marry and when to marry, and to decide on the career path that they want to take.
Wow, that sounds very important. And I'm thinking, especially now when so many things are uncertain, right? And there are so many unexpected pressures coming in, like you mentioned, climate change. But, obviously COVID is the big one, right? No one knows how long it's going to last and the impact on the family overall. You mentioned economic earlier, and that has repercussions throughout, the family members' lives in so many different ways. And so for the girls to feel confidence in how to respond to situations seems, doubly important these days.
Yes. Yeah. And we actually, Marty, we do work with girls. We don't work with girls only. We also actually work with parents. We do 2 sets of workshops for them every year. And then the good thing about us engaging with parents is, our parents' attendance in the workshop is more than 90%. And through that, because we think that when we talk about gender equality in education, or for girls to be empowered, it's not just like a one-way track, like just working with girls. But I think it's also about making sure the parents value their education, to give them enough time to study at home, make it more favorable for them to be able to study for their exams, and to also help sort of save money for their higher level education. And so these workshops are sort of entertaining and very informative for the parents to realize how to be more engaged in their in their daughters' education, how to sort of engage with schools to find out about how they are doing academically. And it's sort of like a long journey, but we have managed to change a lot of parents as well. And we see that in little things like buying a torchlight, or even making weaving a basket for the books, and sort of calling the social mobilizers about their daughter's report card. When we were starting, it was actually the social mobilizers saying, "Okay, the results are out." So it's been working, but then still we had a lot of uncertainties when the COVID started, because we could see that the parents were also losing that motivation. So we send them little messages at times and talk to them as well over the phone to sort of constantly remind them that it's important that when the school reopens, their daughters need to be in school, and even at home, that they're doing all the housework and all the other work that they're helping their parents with. It's important that they set aside some times for them to study.
Yes, yeah, very important. And everyone is feeling so much pressure now, that you can see how, these things would get overlooked. Well, this has been really interesting. Thank you very much. Is there something else that you wanted to mention that we didn't talk about?
I would say a challenge that we had was, well, last year was early marriage as well. Almost 100 plus of our program's girls actually got married. I think that had to do a lot with financial insecurity, and then very poor planning in relief distribution and all that. But we have been trying to focus on certain programs to the radio to make sure that we make the local government more accountable, as well as the parents know the legal consequences of early marriages as well. And we can see that it's working, because just recently there was a case when the relatives were forcing the girl to get married. But once she mentioned the legal aspect of what could happen to them, the mother fully supported her, and the marriage was stopped. So I think this is something that we need to make people more aware of, that the COVID is not just the situation is not just about people who are infected and suffering medically, but it's also about how the girls who are supposed to be in school, the boys who are suffering in school, are sort of also going through a very tough time because of the current situation. And the parents and even the government should be more aware of that.
I'm very happy to hear that outcome, because one of the things that people told me is that, many people know the legal implications, but they go ahead anyway because they've learned how to kind of get around it, and maybe they fiddle with documents. But that's great that that girl had the presence of mind, and that her mother listened to her as well, and acted on what she was saying.
So we hope to get more of those cases happening, girls being more empowered to talk about her rights and to talk about what is good for her, and to be able to negotiate and convince their parents or their families to respect what she wants to do.
Right. But generally, it sounds like you're saying generally things are better this time than during the first lockdown.
It is actually, I would say, better. But the thing is, we also learned from last year's experience, not to let sort of things get worse, and we immediately know what would be best for the girls because of what we experienced last year, and we have been able to support them throughout. And we do hope that the radio programs are not just helping the girls in our project, but also helping other girls and boys as well.
Right. As you described, other students can can share, can listen in on the radio quite easily. Okay, Salina, thank you very much. It was really good to hear about this, and good to hear that you're innovating to keep your programming and the girls' learning on track. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again to Salina Tamang of Room to Read. You can find the organization's website URL in the notes to this show. If you liked what you heard, please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. Keep up with the show between episodes on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We're Nepal Now or Nepal Now Pod. You can send me your feedback, ideas, or just say hi at marty@martylogan.net. Thank you also to Soraya Logan for her work on the show's social media. I am Marty Logan. I produce the show, and we'll talk to you again soon.